Certainly, this fight over tax cuts. I mean, what you call a tax cut, what you call stimulus, is very much up in the air.
Right. The Republicans are running on the notion that the deficit is out of control, and people are worried about it. At the same time, they want to continue the tax cuts on people making over $200,000 for individuals, $250,000 for couples, which would, I think, cost $700 billion, and they don't apparently consider that spending. Somebody that I interviewed this week said that hiring John Boehner as speaker is like buying fire insurance from the guy who lit your house on fire. But are people's memories that short? And here's where I do fault the president. I think all along he should have been explaining what the spending was about, why this short-term stimulus spending was necessary. There's a difference between short-term deficits and long-term deficits. He's supposed to be this great teacher, and I think he really missed the opportunity here, and now it's really taken root that all spending, no matter what it's for, is irresponsible.
Not to mention that the stimulus actually did include some tax cuts, which I think is a point that is often lost in the discussion.
So how can Republicans be pushing for these tax cuts to be kept across the board when, as the president points out, it would add another $700 billion in spending?
Well, if you go back to February of 2009 when the original stimulus was passed, Republicans' argument was, well, we can have twice the stimulus for half the price. They were going to cut taxes, and it was going to be $400 or $500 billion. The point was the government was going to lose a lot of revenue anyway. Their feeling is that if you ask them, they'll just say it doesn't make sense to raise taxes on anybody in a recession. I think this was the week that Obama had to draw a line on extending the Bush tax cuts, and he did draw the line in not wanting to extend them for individuals who make over $200,000 a year, families who make over $250,000. I personally think he had to do this for his base, who he wants to show up to vote in November, because if you are part of the liberal Democratic base and you look at the Obama presidency and you say, well, Guantanamo is still open, we are escalating in Afghanistan, a lot of the Bush national security policies are still in place, and now we're going to keep the Bush tax cuts. I think that's very discouraging to the Democratic base.
But I think it's not just the Democratic base. I mean, Gallup had a poll this morning saying that a plurality of Americans actually support the idea of rolling back those tax cuts for families who make above $250,000 a year.
Eleanor?
I think it's a promise that the president made, and I think his position was muddied this week when his former budget director, Peter Orszag, authored a piece in the New York Times basically advocating for extending all of the tax cuts for 2 years and then eliminating all of them, which, may be the correct fiscal policy, but politically, for a president who is trying to connect with the middle class, to tell the middle class you're going to lose your tax cuts in 2 years, I think is not a wise move.
So what is the president's new top economic advisor, Austin Goolsbee? How is he likely to enter this fray, Eleanor?
I think that he is more liberal than even his predecessor, and I think
Christian Rehm.
Yes, and I think he didn't get one of the top jobs initially because he was thought to be too liberal, and the president was reaching out to voices that he thought mainstream Democrats and Republicans would have confidence in. So I suspect that he's going to be backing up the president.
What do you think, Byron?
I probably agree with that. I think the interesting thing was the word about this is that he was the obvious internal choice, and they really didn't have a lot of people on the outside who were interested in joining the economic team.
Byron York, he's chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner.